Have I ever felt like someone is hiding something from me, but I just can't figure out what it is? I'm sure I've experienced situations where someone made me feel like they were hiding something, but I just couldn't pinpoint what that was. Sometimes their actions made me suspicious, but I couldn't put my finger on the exact issue. And this became even more important when I needed to make a crucial decision, where understanding the motives of others could directly affect the outcome. How do I identify someone's true motives? So how do I identify what someone is really thinking or wanting, especially when I need to make an important decision? Today, I'm going to share with you 14 psychological strategies to understand others. These strategies not only help me read people accurately, but also allow me to understand their hidden motives and true intentions behind their actions. We'll go through each strategy, learn how to spot the small signals others unknowingly reveal, and from there, I'll understand what they really think and want. Not only will this help me become more astute in reading others, but it will also help me make better decisions in tense situations. Strategy 1. Observe how they treat those without power. How do you spot a truly kind person? It's simple. Pay attention to how they treat those who can't offer them anything in return. I remember when I first met Jonathan, a colleague at work who seemed like a genuinely nice guy. He was always friendly, always willing to help, and treated everyone well. But one day, I observed something that made me question how genuine his kindness really was. We were at a work lunch, and I noticed Jonathan being particularly polite to the waiter. He smiled, said "Phew" every time the waiter refilled his glass, and even joked with him as they interacted. I thought, he's a kind person. But something about the way the waiter responded didn't sit right with me. The waiter seemed uncomfortable, almost like he was being too polite in return. Later that afternoon, I went to grab a coffee from the break room, and as I walked by, I overheard Jonathan speaking to the same waiter. His tone was completely different, cold, dismissive, and even a bit rude. I stood there for a moment, trying to understand what had just happened. The person who had been so polite and friendly to the waiter in front of the team was now treating him with indifference when no one was watching. In that moment, I realized something important. Kindness isn't about how we treat people when they can benefit us. It's about how we treat those who can't offer anything in return, those who hold no power over us. True kindness isn't just a facade we put on when others are around. It's an authentic quality that shows up even when no one is watching. Jonathan's behavior made me reflect on how I, too, had treated others in similar situations. It's easy to be polite to those in positions of power, but it takes real character to treat people kindly when they can't offer us anything in return. I've learned that when we observe how someone treats those who seem unimportant, we're really seeing who they are at their core. True kindness is unconditional. It doesn't come with strings attached. It doesn't matter if someone can benefit us or not. What matters is how we treat them. The person who is genuinely kind will never make anyone feel inferior or unimportant. They will treat the janitor, the intern, or even the waiter with the same respect and care as they would a CEO. I've come to realize that the most telling sign of someone's true character is how they treat people who cannot offer them anything in return. The next time you meet someone new, observe how they treat those around them, especially those in positions with less power. Their actions will reveal the truth about their kindness. Example, you might notice that someone is very polite and courteous to the waiter at a restaurant. But if you observe closely when no one is around, they may treat them very differently, even disrespectfully. This shows that they are putting on a false persona when being observed. Strategy 3. Throw a challenge and observe their reaction. I remember a time when I was working on a project with a colleague who seemed to always say the right things, but something felt off. I didn't know whether it was a gut feeling or something more, but I felt I needed to test his character before getting too invested. I decided to create a small challenge. One day, he asked me to attend a meeting that he'd been talking about for weeks. He was expecting me to be there, but something about the request didn't sit right with me. Instead of agreeing right away, I told him I wouldn't be able to make it, even though I knew it would not be a big deal for me to attend. It was a small test, a tiny shift in the way I interacted with him. At first, there was a pause. He looked at me with a slight frown, but I couldn't yet tell if it was just disappointment or something deeper. What happened next, however, was telling. Instead of calmly accepting my response, he began to shift in his chair, his face flushed with frustration. He quickly became defensive, questioning why I couldn't attend and hinting at how important my presence was. The more he spoke, the more he revealed his true character. His reaction wasn't just about the meeting. It was about how he handled the challenge. He was visibly irritated, dismissing my decision without taking the time to understand my reasoning. In the end, he began to talk to others behind my back, gossiping about my refusal, which confirmed my suspicions. It wasn't a sign of someone who respected boundaries or handled situations with maturity. In that moment, I realized that how someone reacts to small challenges can say so much more about their character than any kind of grand gesture. A person who can stay calm, accept things with grace, and handle disappointments respectfully is someone I can trust. But someone who gets angry, defensive, or starts to gossip shows signs of immaturity and a lack of patience. I learned that sometimes it's not about the challenge itself, but how they respond that reveals the truth. Strategy 4. Let them take the lead and see how they handle situations. I recall a time when I was working with a team on a critical project. We were tasked with solving a complex problem, and I was confident in my own ability to handle it. But something told me that this was the perfect opportunity to test the leadership and problem-solving skills of one of my teammates, Sarah. Instead of jumping in and taking control as I usually would, I decided to step back and let Sarah take the lead. I kept my distance, observing how she would handle the situation without my guidance. At first, it felt uncomfortable. I was used to being in control, ensuring things moved smoothly, but this time, I needed to see if Sarah had the qualities that would make her a valuable leader. As the minutes passed, I noticed how Sarah handled the pressure. She didn't rush into decisions or get flustered when things didn't go according to plan. Instead, she paused, took a deep breath, and started organizing the team. She delegated tasks based on each person's strengths, encouraging everyone to contribute. Her ability to collaborate and keep the team focused gave me confidence. However, the true test came when a major issue arose. The team was stuck and no one knew how to move forward. It was the perfect moment for someone to shift the blame or point fingers. But Sarah didn't. She calmly took responsibility for the situation and led the team in brainstorming solutions. It was clear she wasn't afraid of challenges or responsibility. By the end of the day, we had solved the problem as a team. Sarah's leadership had brought us together, and I realized that she had qualities I hadn't fully appreciated before. She had creativity, patience, and a calm presence under pressure, traits that I hadn't noticed when I was always the one taking charge. From that experience, I learned that the best way to understand someone's true character is to let them lead. How they respond when there's no supervision reveals their real capabilities. Sarah's actions showed me that leadership isn't just about taking charge. It's about guiding others through challenges, showing patience, and accepting responsibility without hesitation. Strategy 5. Read their actions, not their words. I remember working on a project where one of my colleagues, Jake, always talked about how much he cared about its success. He would tell everyone that he was fully committed, that he had big plans for how to take things to the next level. It all sounded great, but something didn't sit right with me. At first, I admired his enthusiasm, but soon I noticed a gap between his words and actions. While he spoke passionately about the project, he was often absent from key meetings, and I rarely saw him contribute any feedback. It didn't take long for me to realize that his words didn't match what he was doing. One day, during a critical meeting, Jake was once again missing. I thought back to all the times he had promised to be present and involved. Yet, he was nowhere to be found. The team was left scrambling, and I couldn't help but wonder, did he really care as much as he said? It became clear to me that actions were a far more reliable indicator of his true intentions than his words ever could be. His absence spoke louder than any of the things he had said. His actions showed that he wasn't fully invested in the project, even though he had claimed otherwise. The more I paid attention to his behavior, the more I realized that actions reveal someone's true motives. People can say whatever they want, but their actions don't lie. If someone tells me they care about something, but consistently avoids the hard work or skips out on important tasks, it's a clear sign that their commitment is shallow. From that experience, I learned that I shouldn't just listen to what people say. I need to observe what they do. Words are easy to manipulate, but actions show the truth. If someone's actions contradict their words, it's time to question their sincerity. Strategy 6. Observe what they pay attention to, not what they say. I remember a conversation I had with a close friend of mine, Mia. We were sitting at a cafe, catching up after not seeing each other for weeks. She told me all about her new job, her recent travels, and how things were going in her life. I listened, nodding along, but something felt off. While she was talking, I couldn't help but notice that Mia kept checking her phone every few seconds. At first, I thought maybe it was just an urgent message or a quick check, but it happened repeatedly. She would glance at the screen, tap on it, and then look back at me, only to return to her phone moments later. It started to feel like I was just background noise while she was more focused on whatever was happening on her phone. It struck me that even though she was talking about her life, she wasn't fully present. Her attention wasn't on me or our conversation. It was elsewhere. In that moment, I realized how powerful someone's focus could be. She might have been saying all the right things, telling me that she cared about our friendship, but her actions, or rather, her lack of attention, told me otherwise. Her phone, and whatever was going on there, had captured more of her attention than I did. I thought about how often we allow ourselves to be distracted, even in important moments. It's easy to say that we care, to tell people we're there for them, but true care is reflected in where we place our focus. Mia's constant phone checking showed me that her attention wasn't fully on me, and that spoke louder than her words ever could. From that experience, I learned that actions speak volumes. If someone is constantly looking around the room or checking their phone while I'm speaking, it's a clear sign that they aren't fully present. It doesn't matter how many times they say they care. What truly matters is where their attention goes. Strategy 7. Reveal a fake weakness and watch their reaction. I remember a conversation with a colleague, Mark, who had always been friendly and trustworthy, or so I thought. We were discussing some of the challenges I faced at work, and I decided to try a little experiment. I casually mentioned to him, I tend to overthink things sometimes, as if it were a harmless confession. I didn't expect much from it. It was just a small, relatively benign flaw, something most people would either sympathize with or brush off. But what happened next made me realize the power of this simple comment. Mark's reaction was subtle, but it didn't go unnoticed. He didn't respond with understanding or reassurance. Instead, he paused for a moment, almost too long, as if weighing his options. Then, after a brief silence, he simply nodded and changed the subject. At the time, I thought nothing of it. But weeks later, things started to unfold differently. One afternoon, during a tense meeting, Mark brought up a decision we had made together. He casually mentioned, "Well, I know you tend to overthink things, so maybe we should go with my suggestion on this one." The way he said it, with a slight smirk, told me everything I needed to know. Mark had used my weakness against me. What I had thought was a harmless confession had become ammunition for him. He wasn't just referring to my overthinking in a casual way. He was using it to undermine my judgment in front of others. It became clear that he wasn't as trustworthy as I had once believed. In that moment, I understood the significance of revealing a weakness. If someone uses that weakness against you, It shows that they're opportunistic and manipulative. They're looking for ways to gain an advantage, regardless of how it affects you. On the other hand, if they ignore it or show respect, it's a sign of maturity and trust. Mark's actions confirmed my suspicions. He had used my vulnerability to manipulate me, and I knew then that I couldn't trust him the way I once had. This experience taught me the importance of paying attention to how people react to my weaknesses. It's one of the clearest ways to understand their true character. Strategy 8. Extend the waiting time to test their attitude. I remember a situation at work when I was testing a colleague's patience. We were working on a project with tight deadlines, and normally, I would reply to emails and messages promptly. But that day, I decided to experiment and stretch the waiting time just a bit longer than usual. I had received an email from my colleague John, asking for some information I had promised to provide. Instead of responding right away, I intentionally delayed my reply. I was curious to see how he would react to the wait. As the minutes passed, I could feel the tension in the air. I knew John was likely expecting a quick response. But what happened next told me everything I needed to know about his character. A few minutes after I had delayed, I received a follow-up message from him. It was polite at first, but there was a hint of impatience in his tone. By the time an hour had passed without a response from me, he sent another message. This time, it was more passive-aggressive. He mentioned that he was waiting on my response and how urgent it was. I could tell he was getting frustrated, and his words felt more like a demand than a request. It was clear that John's impatience was starting to show. Instead of adapting to the situation or staying calm, he allowed his frustration to get the better of him. His reaction revealed his sense of entitlement, as though my delay in responding was an inconvenience he couldn't tolerate. On the other hand, I've noticed that when I delay responses with more patient colleagues, they simply wait calmly, understanding that sometimes delays happen. They don't bombard me with follow-up messages, and their approach is respectful, even in situations of uncertainty. This experience taught me that people's reactions to waiting can reveal a lot about their true nature. Impatient people will show their lack of emotional control, while patient people will remain calm and adapt to the situation. It's a small test, but one that can tell you a lot about who they really are. Strategy 9. Observe who they imitate. I recall a conversation I had with one of my colleagues, Daniel. He had always been an intriguing person to me, someone who was constantly talking about his role models and the people he admired. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone has someone they look up to, right? But soon, I began to notice a pattern in who Daniel was always talking about. He would frequently bring up a famous entrepreneur, someone with immense influence and power. At first, I thought it was just admiration for someone who had built something remarkable. But as the weeks went by, I realized it was more than that. Daniel would often mimic the entrepreneur's mannerisms, even down to the way he spoke or gestured during conversations. It was clear that he wanted to be seen as someone powerful, someone in control. But then something else caught my attention. In casual conversations, Daniel started talking more about celebrities, those who were constantly in the public eye, always in the spotlight. He would imitate their way of dressing, their posture, even the way they carried themselves. It was almost like he was trying to fit into a world where people admired him, wanted to be around him. That's when I realized who we imitate speaks volumes about our desires and motivations. Daniel's obsession with powerful figures showed that he craved control, influence, and recognition. But his shift towards imitating celebrities hinted that he also longed for attention and admiration. It wasn't just about power for him, it was about being seen, being noticed. I started thinking about how we all imitate someone at some point in our lives. Some imitate those who have power because they crave control. Others imitate those who get attention, perhaps because they want fame or validation. If someone consistently mimics people who embody certain traits, it reveals their deeper desires and aspirations. For example, If someone constantly talks about a powerful figure or adopts their mannerisms, it may suggest they desire control. If they mimic popular figures, it could be a sign they crave fame. And if they emulate those known for their virtues or integrity, they might be striving for moral superiority. From that experience, I learned that by paying attention to who people imitate, I can better understand their motivations and desires. It's not just about who they admire, it's about what they're trying to achieve or become. Strategy 10. Trigger envy and watch their reaction. I remember having a conversation with a colleague, Sarah, right after I received a promotion at work. It was a big moment for me, and I was excited to share the news with her. We had always been friendly, and I thought she'd be happy for me. But as I casually mentioned the promotion, I noticed something in her reaction that made me pause. At first, she smiled, but there was something off about it. It wasn't the warm, genuine smile I had expected. Her lips tightened for a split second, and her eyes flickered away from me. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. I decided to keep talking, telling her a bit more about the recognition I had received. Sarah quickly changed the topic, redirecting the conversation to something completely unrelated. She spoke about her own work, but there was an undercurrent of tension in her tone. It felt like she was trying to downplay my achievement without directly saying anything negative. That's when I realized what I was witnessing was envy. Envy is a tricky emotion. It doesn't always show itself openly. Instead, it manifests in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. A tight smile, a change in body language, or an abrupt shift in the conversation. These are the micro-reactions that can tell you a lot about how someone truly feels, even if they try to hide it. In Sarah's case, her reaction was a clear sign of envy. She didn't congratulate me or acknowledge my achievement. Instead, she seemed uncomfortable, as if my success had made her feel inadequate. It was a small moment, but it spoke volumes about her feelings. I realized that envy often leads to sabotage, and once you spot it, you can't unsee it. From that experience, I learned that envy is often more visible than we think. It's not always about someone's words, but rather about their micro-reactions. If you see someone's smile tighten, or if they quickly change the topic or try to downplay your success, you might be witnessing envy. And once you notice it, you'll know to be cautious around them. Strategy 11. Ask about what they hate. I remember having a conversation with a new colleague, Lisa. She was friendly and easy to talk to, but there was something about her that made me curious. One day, during a casual lunch break, I decided to ask her a question that I believed could reveal more about who she really was. Instead of asking her what she liked or what she enjoyed doing, I asked, "What kind of behaviors or people really get on your nerves? What do you absolutely hate?" The question caught her off guard at first, but she quickly responded. "I can't stand liars," she said, without hesitation. I found it interesting. Most people would say something more generic, like bad manners or rudeness, but she was very specific about her dislike for liars. It made me pause and think, what does this say about her? Could it be that people who hate something the most are often struggling with it themselves? It occurred to me that when someone expresses hatred for a particular trait, it often reveals something deeper about their own personality. For example, a person who can't stand arrogance might be struggling with feelings of insecurity, or someone who despises dishonesty might secretly be prone to deception themselves. Lisa's answer about liars stuck with me. It made me wonder, could she be hiding something? Did she have her own struggles with honesty that she wasn't acknowledging? This simple question had opened a window into her psyche that I hadn't anticipated. Later, I started asking the same question to other people in my life. I realized that what people claim to hate often reflects their own suppressed traits. If someone says they can't stand weakness, for example, it might mean that they are deeply insecure about being perceived as weak. It's a way for them to project their own insecurities onto others. From that experience, I learned that asking someone about their dislikes can be one of the most revealing questions you can ask. What they hate tells you a lot about their inner conflicts, their suppressed feelings, and the aspects of themselves that they may be trying to avoid facing. Strategy 12. Pay attention to what makes them break eye contact. I vividly remember a moment in a meeting when I was discussing a new project with a colleague. Jack, we had been working together for a while, and things seemed to be going well. But that day, something about his body language felt off. It wasn't his words, they were consistent as usual, but his eyes, they told a different story. We were talking about the budget for the new project, and I noticed that as soon as the topic shifted towards finances, his gaze started to wander. At first, I didn't think much of it. People look away from time to time during a conversation. But as I continued talking about the numbers and asked for his thoughts, I saw him glance down at the table, avoiding my eyes altogether. It wasn't the first time I had seen someone behave this way, but I had never noticed it so clearly before. There was something about the way his gaze broke that told me more than his words ever could. His body stayed engaged, but his eyes were avoiding the truth. As I kept speaking, I intentionally leaned in, mentioning some key financial figures to see how he would react. The more I spoke about the challenges of sticking to the budget, the more I noticed his discomfort. His eyes kept shifting, and every time the conversation veered back to finances, his gaze dropped further. That's when I realized the eyes have a way of revealing emotions that words cannot express. When someone breaks eye contact, it's a sign of discomfort or hidden truths. In Jack's case, his reaction wasn't just about the budget. It was about something deeper, his discomfort with finances, or more likely, his own financial insecurity. I realized that when discussing sensitive topics, paying attention to how someone reacts with their eyes can provide valuable insights. It wasn't just a casual glance away. It was a window into his suppressed emotions. The moment his eyes broke away, I understood that I had touched on something he was trying to hide, something he wasn't ready to confront. Example, if I'm having a conversation about finances, and I notice someone becomes uneasy and avoids eye contact, it could be a sign that they feel insecure about their financial situation. Similarly, if the conversation shifts to discussing past failures or regrets, their eyes might reveal their discomfort, showing just how much they wish to avoid confronting those aspects of their life. Strategy 13. Mirror their behavior to expose their true self. During one of my business meetings, I was speaking with a client, Brian, who had a reputation for being very confident. He stood tall, spoke in a firm tone, and had an air of authority around him that commanded attention. The way he interacted with others, especially in high-stakes conversations, was always composed and assertive. But I couldn't help but wonder, was this truly who he was, or was it just an act? That's when I remembered something Machiavelli wrote about using mirroring to expose a person's true self. The idea was simple yet powerful. If you mirror someone's behavior, their instincts will react in ways that reveal whether they are being authentic or playing a role. So I decided to try it. The next time Brian spoke with confidence about a business decision, I subtly began to mirror his posture. When he leaned forward in his chair, I did the same. When his voice raised in enthusiasm, I matched his tone. As I did this, I watched his every reaction carefully. At first, Brian didn't seem to notice. His confidence seemed unshaken, and the conversation flowed easily. But as I continued to mirror him more closely, something shifted. He started to look a bit uncomfortable. His body language tightened, and he suddenly pulled back, almost imperceptibly from me. His eyes flickered as if he had noticed the slight change, but he quickly tried to regain control by speaking more assertively. I realized then that Brian wasn't as confident as he had led me to believe. His response to my mirroring revealed that he wasn't as comfortable in his own skin as his persona suggested. This behavior was a sign that he had been putting on a front, trying to project an image of strength and certainty, when in reality, he may have been hiding his vulnerabilities. Example, if I notice someone speaking with a lot of confidence, I can mirror their tone and posture. If they suddenly pull back, try to overpower me, or exhibit signs of discomfort, it reveals that they might have been putting on a front. This shift in behavior exposes their true self, one that is not as secure as they want to show the world. Strategy 14. Disarm them with respect before asking the tough question. In one of the most challenging discussions of my career, I had to confront a colleague, Paul, about a decision he had made that was impacting the entire team. Paul was a senior manager, highly respected, and someone who was often seen as untouchable in the workplace. Approaching him with any sort of critique had always felt daunting, and I knew I had to handle this conversation with care. I realized that in order to get past his defenses and have an open, honest conversation, I needed to first show him respect. People who expect judgment or confrontation come prepared with defenses, but if I disarmed him with respect, I could bypass those defenses and ask the real question. Before addressing the issue, I began by complimenting his work ethic. "Paul, I really admire how well you handle stress and how you manage to stay calm under pressure. It's something I've always looked up to." His eyes softened as he heard the praise, and for a moment, I could tell he was surprised. It was clear that this wasn't the approach he had anticipated. I had given him respect, something he wasn't expecting, and it had lowered his guard. Now that I had disarmed him with respect, I asked the question that had been on my mind. "But with all that pressure, what's the biggest fear behind your decisions? Is there something you're worried about that's driving these choices?" His demeanor shifted, and for the first time, he looked vulnerable. He paused for a long moment, then sighed, acknowledging the pressure he had been feeling to maintain control, fearing that any slip-up would jeopardize his position. By giving him respect first, I had created a window for deeper questions. This approach made him feel safe and understood, allowing him to open up and share his true thoughts. The tough question that followed didn't feel like an attack. Instead, it felt like a genuine inquiry into his fears and motivations. Example, I might say to someone, "I admire how you handle stress so well, but what's the biggest fear behind your decisions?" Giving them respect first makes them feel safe, and they're more likely to open up and share their real feelings.